YouTubers, affiliates, syndicates, you know what time it is. It is time for Trends in the Housing Market. It is I, Mike Martins, your humble patriot, bringing you Trends in the Housing Market. What date are we sitting at here? Let me get my notes up here. Sorry, guys, for being unorganized. Today is the 3rd of August, 2017. And today, man, do I have a treat for you guys. I'm not going to do too much talking today because I have a very special guest that's going to be on the show. I would like to thank a lot of people that are rebroadcasting this in their housing discussion shows and radio stations, picking up some of the clips of me talking and discussing what's going on in the housing market. And there was a radio station down in Oregon that was discussing me and what I've been doing and how I've been following the trends in the housing market for the last, I think it's going to be almost 4 years now. I've been talking about the housing market here on my page, and the amount of people. They reach a lot of people, that syndicate down in that radio station down in Portland, and I'm very happy that they talked about me and talked about how I'm taking housing discussion and making it into something cool or something for people to talk about or something for people to understand. And the replay of the show, I don't get a lot of people watching it live because of the time difference, and the time difference right now, it's already like a day ahead in New Zealand and in Australia. And because I'm on Pacific, Tijuana, Vancouver time, Los Angeles time, people living in New York right now and Chicago and Miami, it's already midnight there that are watching this show. I want to thank everyone that listens to this and replay while they're at work or while they're doing things. I just want to give a big hug for all the supporters out there. Thank you very much. And let's get started with trends in the housing market. I got a very special guest on. We're going to call him Mr. X. He wishes to remain anonymous. He's not your typical real estate agent. He is a very in-depth. He works in real estate, but works in an in-depth perspective and writes a lot of theses and books, and has put together a lot of projects and in discussion with the housing market. This guy knows anything and everything about the housing market. He wishes to remain anonymous, but he will be joining us in a few minutes here from New York, from Manhattan, New York. I know the time there. I told him that the time difference might be a problem for him. He says it doesn't matter. He wants to be on the show. And I said, okay, that's fine. Very in-depth speaker, and I would like for you guys to leave your comments on the right here. I got the comments open, so if you guys would like to leave your comments here for me, and for Mr. X, well, I'll be more than happy to ask him the question you want to ask him. And let's kick it off. Let's start with Watson Estates. Really good guy, really good channel. He's basically a guy that understands the markets really well, works in the markets in depth, knows what he's talking about. Somebody's calling in. Hello? Well, somebody just called in to the show, and it's a private number. No one's got this number. So, Watson Estates, I really strong you guys. I really recommend. Okay, somebody's calling again. Hello.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, is this Mr. X?
This is Mr. X.
Are you watching my show?
I am.
Wow.
Hello. Hey, Mike.
Okay, so we're gonna get a little bit of feedback. You want to lower your audio there on your computer or TV or whatever you're watching it on?
Yep, no problem at all.
Yeah, because we're gonna catch that up. Because I'm about 20 seconds ahead of what people are listening to. So, all right, you there?
Yep.
Okay, all right, Mr. X, tell us a little bit. Where you calling from?
I'm calling from New York right now. I go city to city a little bit, depending on the project and the opportunity. But for the most part, I focus on the big cities.
Okay, good, good. It's a pleasure to have you on our show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. Now, I'm going to kick off the show here. I'm going to read. There's a couple of articles. If you want to weigh in and discuss what's going. Okay, first, tell us what you've been working on for starters.
Well, I've been tracking the inefficiencies in the real estate market, particularly the residential market, and how because of the fact that we're still largely paper-based and board-based real estate transaction system, we have these huge standard deviations from the mean sales price that aren't always accounted for in material value. So the difference between value and price is substantial.
Okay. Exactly. Like I was talking, I don't remember if we had this discussion where I said, would you pay Lamborghini price for a 1981 Volkswagen Scirocco?
Exactly. And the funny thing is when you look at it from the standpoint of how much equity you have to put down relative to how much debt or how much relative to the total purchase price, it actually winds up being quite often more than the entire value of the equity.
Exactly. So now, apparently you've written a paper of some sorts?
Yep, several.
Okay, so you want to maybe kind of... Are you allowed to talk about some of that stuff, or...?
Absolutely. So basically what I've done is I've analyzed several large markets and determined that most boards, especially in Canada, have incomplete information. They're not tracking necessarily height of unit, which has value. They're not necessarily differentiating by construction type, so the difference between concrete and wood frame, which is a material value difference. And what's happening is a lot of people are not even accounting for land value when they're looking at houses. So what's happening is that you're getting these huge swings in value because a lot of people are buying on an emotional reason, or they're buying just to get into the market, and they're not targeting it as a rational investment. And while that makes sense from a family who wants to buy a home, who wants to have a place to live, from an investment standpoint, it just doesn't line up. The standard deviations are so large; they're larger than the arbitrage opportunities the stock market's had in the early 1980s and late 1970s.
Exactly. So what's been happening is I'm seeing, especially in parts of Central and Northern California, and now in Seattle, of all places, people being with the fear of being bought out of the market, families growing, families with no wanting to lay roots, and just not being able to do so because. Or with the fear of being bought out of the market, and then thinking that, if they don't jump on the bandwagon now, they'll end up paying more later, right?
Exactly. And when you look at the interesting about Seattle in particular is the amount of new tech jobs that are coming on. So as a result, a person fresh out of university with a full stack engineering degree is making over $190,000 US. So effectively, they're making more than most fully licensed professionals who've been in industries for years.
Exactly.
So that's where the income is validating those that rate of the Seattle market taking off. Whereas you look at Vancouver, the market's income never really caught up with the rate that it's growing. Wow.
So I got something I actually want to throw at you right now. You're not going to believe this, but do you know? I have the article open right in front so people could see it. Do you know that Tacoma ranks 5th most competitive housing market in the nation in the United States? Tacoma?
How do you define competitive in this case?
Well, this is what the article's saying. I can't believe it. Tacoma, Washington, Seattle tends to get all the attention. New data from Redfin ranks Tacoma among the top 5 most competitive cities in the nation in terms of its housing market. So I
can see that.
I'm blown away. And Tacoma, to me, is like, not like a Detroit, but more of like, you know what I mean? It's not really like, the 5-star Ritz-Carlton, you know what I'm saying, right?
It's a secondary market to Seattle, absolutely. It's a secondary service town.
And for it being 5th biggest in the United States of America, I can't fathom that. I just can't believe it. Of all major cities that could be basically taking in the more, you know what I mean, right? So,
oh, absolutely.
So tell us more. What did you find? I remember talking to you a few weeks back, and you telling me, you remember telling me about your findings. You found something that was so overbearing in the housing market. You were focused on the Vancouver housing market. I guess that's probably how you found me on YouTube, right? And
Yep.
what did you find? What you said you found something with condos or something.
Well, I mean, specifically that was related to the arbitrage opportunities in condos.
Mm-hmm.
If you have two units that are basically beside each other or above and below each other, they should be fairly comparable in sale value, but they're not. In fact, quite often there's such a material difference that if you target well and target smartly, you can get an abnormal return. But, a lot of people talk about the nature of the market, about Vancouver, about how it doesn't have much support, especially due to income. But when you look at the supply and demand, that's what drives this abnormal market, this sheer inability to afford anything. You look at the average household income being in the 70s, thousands of dollars. That won't even debt service a one bedroom nowadays.
Yeah, that service, and that's why what's happened in London. If you watch last week trends in the housing market, there's a huge mass exodus leaving London. London, England, a lot of people are leaving in mass, in droves. The millennials, everyone's leaving and moving to cheaper towns. You know what I'm trying?
There's a couple of things related to that, and it's funny because The Economist, the magazine, actually called this several years ago. They said that if you didn't increase the density within the core of London in terms of urban planning, you didn't increase the density, then the prices would become so uneconomical that it would force people to leave the city. Then you add to that the fact that there's a bunch of risks related to the financial industry when they did the Brexit move, and all of a sudden the high-income jobs that were driven primarily by the financial industry start drying up quite quickly. And so a lot of those firms are starting to pull back the reins a little bit, and they're going, okay, how do we make sure we mitigate our risk? And so they're not giving raises, they're hiring fewer people, and as a result, you see a mass exodus from a city that otherwise would be thriving.
Excellent. So that's a very good in-depth look on that. I never actually saw that specific angle. I just call it from a street look, like a person, like a street person would look at it, and I would say it's a brain drain. Plain English, the doctors, the six-figure income people can't even afford to live in London. Same thing with Vancouver. Same thing with Melbourne. Same thing with Sydney. Same thing with even Dublin. People cannot afford to live in these cities. So a lot of the professionals that are needed in those cities are just leaving to move to more affordable places. Now I got this article up right now on the screen, and you were just talking about this. Vancouver's tech scene shows just how effed up the city's real estate is. Is that a police car?
Yeah, I apologize for that.
That's okay. It's not your fault. Are they coming for you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
No.
Typical New York police sirens, eh?
Pretty much.
Okay, Vancouver's tech scene shows just how effed up the city's real estate is. It's a really good... So, I'm going to read a bit of the article, okay? Think Vancouver's aggressive move to bring tech jobs is going to fix the housing problem? Think again. U.S. commercial real estate mega firm prepared a report ranking the 50 best tech hubs for their clients. Vancouver topped the list for employers because of the high-quality employees and low pay. In fact, the pay was the cheapest of any North American tech hub, so we wanted to see what kind of real estate these employees are looking at. So they're looking at their wages here. So included employee-made 57 large, so 57,000 Canadian, which is 45,000 US. And they're talking about how a lot of these techie people that want to come and work in the Vancouver hub are turning away because they can't afford to live in the city. So you there, Nick? Are you there, Mr.
Yeah,
X?
that's. I'm not at all surprised. It's funny that you say that because it's not just tech. If you look at the government jobs now, government is having a really tough time replacing their jobs. To give you an example, one of the major health authorities that shall remain nameless, they're including their pensions and their pay and everything. after union dues, they're netting less than $2,000 for someone who requires a postgraduate degree, netting less than $2,000 after tax after union dues. And you go, how can you survive in a city where you basically can't get into a 1970s beat-up old wood frame apartment for less than $1,600 a month?
Yeah. And this is what it's saying here. The article goes on to say, average rental consumes 52% of the average tech worker's income.
That's right.
It's a huge problem. So Vancouver wants to be, and then the article goes on to say, is home ownership an option? Yeah, their salaries do not leave wiggle room, so we wanted to test the possibility of home ownership. No, we aren't going to use subprime borrowing or high ratio mortgage. So basically it says condo prices are over 13 times their income.
That's about right. Yeah, if you look at RBC's policy, they generally don't want you to have more than 35% of your after-tax income allocated to mortgage service. So even if you had the down payment, even if you had the principal deposit, you wouldn't be able to hit the debt service requirements without a doubt. I mean, it's not even close, because that would mean that for someone who's making $45,000, even after taxes, which are abnormally high in that province, by the way, in terms of income, personal income, but at that point in time, you're looking at a material amount of income, far more than 30%, to even make it for a bachelor.
Yeah. So are you ready for this? Are you sitting down for this? Typical detached is 35 times the average tech employee's income. Wow.
Yep. Oh, absolutely.
Wow. And tech is where the money is at. I mean, for the typical millennial, you know what I'm saying, right? The typical millennial graduate. You know, a lot of people aren't becoming doctors as much as anymore. A lot of people aren't becoming lawyers as much as anymore. A lot of people aren't becoming carpenters, or, you know, a lot of skilled trades are kind of being taken over by the tech industry, and a lot of people are going into that whole tech. They like the video games, they like the role playing, they like the whole thing, and they want to be part of it, right? But 35 times.
Specifically, skilled trades is a nuance. That one industry is a nuance. The reason why I mention it is because there's such a shortage in most major cities of skilled trades that wage premiums are going up substantially. And that one, it may not be in that much trouble because the shortage is getting worse and worse. However, anything to do with white-collar jobs, or even working support staff such as paralegals, good luck.
Okay, so I got Stefano Barca here, just commented on the post here, on our live comments here. He says, I graduated from Sheridan College with honors in computer programming. I got hired by the provincial government to do it, basically Windows remote access to fix PC issues. They hired me through a temp. Agency only offered me $20 an hour, 40 hours a week, 0 benefits. And you know, wow. Yeah, so basically, I'm seeing this a lot. I've been seeing this pattern a lot for people that almost any industry that involves tech, whether it's animation, audio, whatever, visual, whatever you're working. I've been noticing a lot of people have been working on contracts. No guarantees, no nothing, you know, no rehire. You know what I'm trying to say, right? There's no stability, and I'm noticing a lot of people's contracts ending, and they have to move out of the city.
A lot of people need that in order to make it tax efficient, right? Which is terrible because then you don't have any stability, no pension, no benefits. But in terms of netting that extra 10 or 15% from tax efficiency, that does play a big role. Yeah.
And then he goes on to say his contract gets renewed on a yearly basis. No guarantee of renewal either. Some employees were there for over 8 years on contract. So there's no guarantee. So you're basically you're on a whim. You're just kind of, yeah. Let's move on to our next article here, Mr. X, if you're still there.
Yep.
I know you're still there. How's the weather out there?
Well, I mean, it's pretty dark, honestly. I'm inside. I've been working all day, so okay. I haven't seen the light of day in a while.
Am I waking people up in the house?
No, you're fine.
Oh. Okay, hold on a sec. Stefano just commented again. The guy with the contract job says, can't even get an approval for a mortgage. You know why? Because he's temp.
That's right. The second that you are run on the contract, you have to have 2 years, typically in Canada, and more than that in the States, depending on the lender, of stabilized contract work. So you have to have multiple sources. Typically, you need between 3 and 4 stabilized ongoing sources for over 2 years to qualify for conventional mortgages.
Oh wow, I feel for some of these people. Work hard, they were bought into that whole student loan thing. Get your degree, get this, get that. You'll be more desired for a job. Now you're just being put into being put through temp agencies and working off contracts, yearly or monthly or quarterly contracts. I think it's ridiculous. Okay. Toronto's well-paid tech workers need 24 years to save for a condo down payment. That's in the city of Toronto. That's in the city of Toronto, my man, Mr. X.
Toronto's an interesting market right now because of the new foreign tax that's coming in, foreign owner tax play. It's going to affect the market materially for a short period of time. And that's where most people don't understand is that yes, this tax will come in. Yes, it will dissuade money to go into residential real estate short term. But if you look at the patterns that happened when it did it in Vancouver, what happened was that basically people found a way around it. They found a way around it quite quickly. You can incorporate a company and have it held by a lawyer at a lawyer's address, and you can work around it quite quickly. And if they have the same legislation, which I don't know the details of, I have to verify in Toronto, then it should be a matter of months before the market comes back aggressively.
So this is the article. That's what it says. This is the article title. Toronto's well-paid tech workers need 24 years to save a condo down payment. I'm actually fathoming. Like I don't even know where to go with this because it's something that our minds are programmed to accept. It's like this is worse than a death in the family because people don't even know how bad this is. You know what I'm saying? And it's the same thing here. It goes, think Toronto is the right move for your well-paid tech career. International commercial real estate firm prepared a report for U.S. tech firms ranking the best valued. So it goes, wages are the second lowest of all tech hubs, and with 58,000 Canadian. And it's basically like the other article I just read for you, but this one, a detached home is 30 years, the average tech employee's gross wage, which is a little bit longer than the Vancouver. So I just... And
this is why every tech individual is wanting to do some project on the side. This is why they're pushing to go out and do entrepreneurial things, because they really don't have a choice. You see the writing on the wall, and they go, if they don't make a move, they're going to be stuck for 24 years.
And that's why a lot of people are trying to get jobs down in Brazil, Mexico, and because those countries too need tech workers, right?
I mean, you look at major federal initiatives like the Mars Entrepreneurial Office down in Toronto, and they're trying really hard. They're funding to try and create this tech hub around the city. But the bottom line is that they can't even afford office space, so they have to do shared office space, and even that's expensive.
Yep. Are you ready for this one? This is the article, and I'm gonna ask you it as a question, and you're gonna tell me what you think. Canadian real estate prices will fall 28% by 2020, according to this model. I'm obviously you can't see the model, but can you forecast this? What do you see?
Well, historically, Calgary's been a boom and bust market. They've always gone up and down and up and down. You've seen big fluctuations. Toronto, a little less so, but it still has had some major downs. With the exception of a few very aggressive spikes in interest that resulted in short periods of decline. For most of the recent history, and I mean, when I'm saying recent, I mean over 30 years, Vancouver's market has always acted like a staircase. So despite the fact that it has a few soft points, it rarely goes down. It usually goes up and then flat and then up again. But it can stay flat for a long period of time, like the last time NBC took power. Okay.
So why do they say 28%? Why 28? Why not 30? That's what I always wanted to know.
Well, I'd love to know the model to understand this. For me, it really comes down to the supply and demand imbalance in Vancouver. So what most people don't know about this market is that in Vancouver, the supply has not increased at a rapid rate. And a lot of people are pushing for rapid increase in density in multiple areas to try and facilitate this. But all that will do is relieve pressure on the top end of the market. It won't help with the bottom end of the market. So most of the bottom end of the market will still continue to go up regardless. So even if they do allow for a massive increase in density and towers built all over the city, it's only going to help the mid to upper level market decrease in pressure. The lower market will basically continue to rise. It's just a supply and demand function. You've got, thousands of immigrants, tens of thousands. Last time I checked, the net immigration in British Columbia was over 35,000 people. And if you look at that and go, okay, 35,000 people, the city of Vancouver is not building enough housing.
Exactly.
Including Surrey, including other, in order to facilitate that growth in population.
Can I step in and ask something? What about the 40,000 empty units?
So there's been a lot of discussion about that, and a lot of people count windows and have this theory about that. But if you actually break it out, the whole 1% vacant tax, the vacant tax discussion that they had a few years ago, they had a really tough time trying to determine what a vacant house actually was. Not only that, how to determine whether it was vacant. And finally, whether or not that had an impact on supply and demand. But honestly, most units do get rented. I mean, I'm not saying all by any means, but most are still either rented or occupied.
Okay, because when I lived in Vancouver, if I was up by Renfrew area, Renfrew in first, Renfrew in second, Renfrew in third, right? Second, third, Fourth Avenue, I would go for a nice long walk all the way down to, let's say, Nanaimo or Commercial Drive, which is a long stretch. I would see a ton of homes with uncut grass, fences falling over, not boarded up, though. Some of them are boarded up, not boarded up, but a lot of homes that look like decrepit, not being taken care of. I saw quite a few.
Well, the thing about that is that there is quite a few, and this has to do with the drag and approval process. So a lot of these assembly development opportunities can have to sit vacant for 2 to 5 years because of the fact that the city, the developer has to assemble 5 or 6 lots, and quite often people don't want to leave at the same time. So they tie up 2 or 3 key properties to try and force the other owners to sell. And then once they have all the blocks, then they assemble it, and then it still goes through 2 years of approvals.
You're talking about land assemblies, right?
So yeah, so if the developer's lucky, you can rent it during that time. But most developers wind up being in a situation that they can't rent it, so they get into a really awkward position.
I see where you're going with that. But I got one article I want to spring up here, and I brought this article up about 3-4 weeks ago on my show, and I want to bring this up again because it's actually a really good one. Vacant homes are a global epidemic, and Paris is fighting it with a 60% tax on vacant homes.
Yep.
Runaway real estate speculation has been filling global capitals with vacant homes, creating artificial shortages in the world's most sought-after cities. The shortage has made local homeowners wealthy overnight, but it comes at the cost of turning lively cities into empty shells. The city of Paris has decided it's had enough and implemented a tax. In 2015, they didn't quite get the results they wanted, so now they're tripling the tax to 60%.
I think that's a great thing to do to try and respect the people. However, there is an issue with execution here. How do you deem a place occupied? Is it the electric bill? Okay, I'll leave my lights on because it's cheaper than the tax. Is it, I need a car in the driveway? Okay, I'll leave a car in the driveway. The thing is that the people who are owning these multi-million-dollar houses in Paris can afford to do that. So, okay, if you need help to go in there once a week to show that there's motion in the house, like, how do you actually define it as empty? Not only that, how do you avoid misassigning it as empty? And that's where the governments are really going to have trouble, because the city of Vancouver tried to do the exact same thing, and he's having a really tough time executing.
Well, maybe going after the more abandoned-looking homes, and then...
Fair enough. That's a good start.
That's a good start. Start going after the abandoned homes, abandoned-looking stuff, decrepit, uncut lawns, and then send them a notice. If there's no reply, then you go ahead and start basically taking action. That's then go from there and then start getting solicitors, working for the government, soliciting homes to see who's home, leaving a piece of tape over by a windowsill over on a corner, see if the tape gets removed, right? Or something like a little trick to see if anyone's ever been, you know.
But those little tricks are simple. You have a maid come in once a week.
Yeah, no, I'm talking about the decrepit stuff, the stuff that nobody cares about, right? And
yeah, fair enough.
And that will give you kind of an insight. I don't know. I'm just throwing some ideas out there. But yeah, you do bring up a very valid point, is how or when do you take action, and how do you know when a place is considered vacant? And that's a really good, really good valid question. So let's move on here. Let's see where we're gonna go here. Oh, I gotta bring this one up, sir. This is a really good one. I don't know if you've seen the article, but I have it up on the screen here. Housing crisis drives homeless Australians to central bank's doors. Now, for radio listeners or people that are listening to this on podcast, I want to first, before I even go any further, I want to thank the gentleman down in, I think he's out of Chicago, who's been actually transmitting or redoing my video with audio only and putting it into a podcast form. I'm really happy for whoever's been doing that. I'm really grateful. So people listening to this at work like listening to the show. But anyways, let's get to this. So basically for radio listeners, I want to explain to you what I'm looking at. A big bank. It's a huge institution and hundreds of tents outside in the parking lot of the bank. Lots of tents. So I'm gonna read this a bit. It's impossible to afford accommodation in the city, said a gentleman who has been living on the streets for 3 years and declined to give his surname. We get some lovely people along here to give us a hand. They bring us food, they bring us clothing, and they donate money. So I don't know, Mr. X, if you've been following what's been happening in Australia, in Sydney and Melbourne. I don't.
I have to admit my information is a little bit out of date in this market.
Okay, but I'll fill you in for the listeners listening. It's been so bad in Sydney and Melbourne that the typical one-bedroom, no parking condo is going for 1.1 million Australian dollars, which is exactly equivalent 1-to-1 with the Canadian dollar. That is how bad it's been in Australia. Australia is so bought out of the market that the Australian proper is so in the pits right now, especially first-time home buyers, especially anyone that's even thinking of getting into the market. I saw an article about 3 weeks ago about first-time home buyers. There was 2 articles, one for Auckland, New Zealand, and one for Australia, for Sydney. And it says, first home-time buyers get this great deal. And it was a house, detached, 2-bedroom, one bath, and it was probably 1,000 square feet. And it was advertised as attention first-time home buyers. And you know, they were asking $1.4 million. And I couldn't believe the condition of the home and what they were asking for it. And I couldn't believe $1.4 million. And it wasn't inside, it was outside of Sydney, like 40-minute drive. So it wasn't in Sydney either. So Australia right now and New Zealand is, you have no idea what's happening there. People should feel for the people in Australia, like what's been happening. So many of them have been bought out of the market, misplaced. The homelessness is, okay. I'm going to find a part of the article here. The housing crisis is playing out against the backdrop of a rising debate about inequality in Australia. The opposition Labour Party wants to crack down on tax breaks for the wealthy to help bridge what it is a widening gap between rich and poor. The government, in contrast, insists there's been no worsening in equality. That's what the government obviously says. There's no worsening in inequality. But this Australia's, I really feel for the people. And it goes back to what you said, Mr. X, about the shortage of housing and affordable housing. And that's what's happening in Australia. But what Australia is not doing is they're not implementing any laws like vacant tax law, foreign buyers tax.
A couple of years ago, they tried to push through some legislation related to foreign ownership, and that's the last time I really followed this market. And don't get me wrong, I spent a year in Australia. I love Melbourne. I love Sydney. They're beautiful cities. In fact, they're so gorgeous that I can see why people are scrambling to get a hold of these pieces of real estate for millions. But at the same time, you look at that and you go, okay, well, are they trying to do something about it to really help people? Well, if you go to their website, there's an entire program related to foreign buyers having the right to buy residential real estate. An entire website devoted to strictly supporting that pipeline, claiming that it adds construction jobs and other sources of revenue. So, effectively, they're one hand is not talking to the other in terms of the government.
Decompartmentalization.
Exactly.
No one knows what's going on in one room, in the other room, and before you know it, they're building something of mass destruction. They don't even know what they're building.
Yeah, it's firb.gov.au/real estate. There's a whole program related to promoting foreign ownership of residential real estate.
Interesting. So now there's one thing I've been talking about on my show. When they introduced the foreign buyers tax in Toronto, I've been boasting about this for the people watching the show. There I am talking about it there, and there I am talking about it there. And this is back when they introduced the tax in Toronto. This is back when they introduced everything. And I told everybody I forecasted exactly what was going to happen to a T. What I did was I said it's going to happen exactly like Vancouver. Everyone's going to jump on the condo market once that tax gets played in. Now, I've been talking about this, and I talked about it on the other show. There I am there again on the other show talking about the same thing that's going to happen, predicting it. I'm not predicting it. I'm just following what happened in Australia. I mean, what happened in Vancouver. Now, look at this article from today. Housing slowdown? New condo sales are booming in Toronto. Now, Mr. X, can you please help me in explaining why, when the tax was implemented in Vancouver, everyone jumped onto the condo market and the low costing units? Now in Toronto, it's seeing the exact same thing. Why is this happening?
It's a threshold issue, and it really comes down to debt service. So what happens in these markets is that it's all a function of income, right? You can only allocate so much income to your house and to your debt service, and even if your parents give you your down payment. Even if you're lucky enough to have a family to support you in that regard, which is what most of the people in these markets are doing already. If you look at it, basically at about $750,000 at today's interest rate, a dual income professional couple with a relatively high income per capita can't afford much above $750,000. So even if they have a 10 or 15% down payment. So what that means is that as soon as single family homes crack that $750,000 line, they're no longer in reach of even the professional couples. And that's when condo markets take off, because that's when everyone who's even aspiring to reach, and they're young in their career, realize the likelihood of them ever getting to a house is extremely low.
Exactly. Yeah, so that's a really good point of view on that. But it happened in Vancouver. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
The condo market took off. Last week's show, I don't know if you noticed, but in West Vancouver, did you see the condos went up in the last 3 months over $100,000?
Yes.
How do you fathom that? How do you even explain that?
Well, it's funny. This particular turn in the market, I can't explain just yet. But the last time I saw a turn like this in West Vancouver as a market was when a Chinese show decided to run a feature explicitly about the West Van market. And they created a TV show that's all over China. It had the ability to promote these multi-million-dollar mansions on the North Shore. And as a result, demand for foreign investment just shot through the roof. And I can't remember the exact percentage because this is a number of years ago, but it was an immediate, substantial spike in value. The bottom line is that if you look at the condos in West Van, they're older product for the most part, with the exception of a few new ones that are being built. So they were relatively cheap. And if you want your kid in good schools with good ratios of teachers to students, you know, in a strong tax bracket, this is a great way to get your child into a neighborhood that has a good financial backing.
Okay, so what you're saying is a lot of people are attracted to the education system, the healthcare system, the infrastructure, the no pollution, fresh air kind of lifestyle.
Well, yeah, a couple of years ago, I was in Vancouver, and I was with a friend, and they had an injury, and he was all the way almost at UBC. And he said, all right, don't take me to VGH. And I said, why not VGH? He goes, the lineup will be 4 hours. I said, all right, I'll take you to St. Paul's. He goes, no, don't take me to St. Paul's downtown. That'll be 3 to 4 hours. Drive me to Lionsgate in North Van, and the wait will be less than an hour.
Wow. Yeah, well, obviously, because, depending what parts of the city you go to, you're always going to find, if you have to know the know, right?
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
And obviously West Van is a lot of people don't think to go to West Van when they want to eat fast food or when they want to go shopping, or especially if they're in the Vancouver proper area, right? And that's a smart thing. A smart thing to think. If you want to do Christmas shopping, maybe go to West Van. Be less people in the malls, right? But
well, I mean, Park Royal is notorious for having terrible parking, but yes, I know what you mean.
Yeah. Okay, I got another article here. It's a pretty good one. Canadian realtors brace for the end of the boom as housing market tightens. I'm going to get to the part of the article I want to pick out here. Where'd it go? Damn, where'd you go? Oh, no. I think I lost what I wanted to read here. It's a long article, boy. Okay. Well, the housing has long been the main engine of Canadian growth. Now, can you please comment on that? Because I know a lot of people know that are watching this channel, that have been watching my channel for a long time, understand that Canada is backing a good part of its economy on the housing market. Do you agree or disagree with that?
I agree with that very much so, especially since we haven't approved the pipelines.
Right. What hasn't been happening in Canada is production, fabrication, exportation. A country's proper economy thrives off exports. And we're not doing that as much. And I think we're building our economy off ripping people off, like people ripping people off and, you know, messing around with people's, you know what I'm saying, like, and then also off student loans, unsecured debt, and mortgages I think are the gumshoe and the sticky tape that's holding the economy together in Canada.
Well, and don't forget the tax base. And this is what's really interesting is don't forget that property tax is a major driver of wealth for the government.
That's right.
So the faster that the property values go up, the faster they can crank up their tax revenue.
Mm-hmm. So that's, but isn't that, it's unsustainable. It's almost like a hamster in a wheel, but eventually it's going to have to run out of fuel because it's like you're robbing Paul to pay back Peter. There's no, you know what I'm trying to say? It's like it's taking out of one pocket and putting in the next pocket. Because the money isn't being produced from exports or fabrication or exploration for minerals and stuff. You know what I'm trying to say? And
well, there are a number of people in the Toronto market, the New York market, the Montreal market. I mean, almost every market that are making their living by buying older product and fixing it up. Mm-hmm. So there is actually value add going into it. But is that a sustainable industry in and of itself when you're always looking for the more expensive and bigger and badder buyer? Probably not.
Yeah, exactly. So it says here, realtors rank in Canada's largest city and the hottest housing market have surged 77% since 2008 to more than 48,000, nearly 10 times the pace of Canadian job growth. Nationwide, the number has risen 26.9%. and they're calling it Canada's house party. The housing boom in Canada has spurred job growth in real estate, but economists think the boom may soon go bust. So this is for realtors. Realtors look like, it says here, by comparison, there are over 13,500 realtors in Chicago, according to the Chicago Association of Realtors. With Canadian home construction, jobs rising in nearly the same pace as real estate jobs. So construction jobs are going up just as fast as real estate jobs. Can you believe that? Housing has become the top driver of employment and economic growth, accounting for bulk of Canada's economic growth last year. So I know you're in real estate. You work in real estate, right? And you understand the market. Yeah. You write papers. You're in depth with real estate. How do you feel? How do you feel with your job? Do you feel it's on the road?
So that's the reason why I'm not your conventional realtor. I don't live and die by glad handing and sales like most realtors do.
Okay.
I base almost everything I do off of statistics. I'm a card counter when it comes to real estate. Mm-hmm. But if you were to talk about in terms of per capita, Vancouver, at least as of 5 years ago, was considered the highest per capita realtor ratio of relative to population of any city in North America. They also had the lowest fees, which is really interesting on a percentage basis, not but because values are so crazy that kind of offsets it. But what was so interesting about this was that it's so competitive and so aggressive, and only a few of those realtors actually make a real living off of it. A lot of them use it as a secondary source of income to try and afford the city. And it's the same with New York. New York's been that way for a long time, where a lot of realtors aren't full-time realtors. They just hope they can get a few listings on the side to supplement their income to afford rent.
I used to know, like, down in Florida, I used to know, like, people that would be, for example, construction workers or carpenters or landscapers, but they'd still do real estate on the side.
Exactly.
Which was very interesting when I saw that. I'm like, I'm pretty sure if they dedicated more time to listings and showing properties than cutting grass, I think they could do better. You know what I'm saying? But
well, and I mean, I hate to say it, but if you reference The Big Short and how that looked in Florida back then,
mm-hmm.
A lot of people were part-time or at least got into it because they didn't want to miss out on the cash cow, and then all of a sudden the market turned on them.
Yeah. I was in Florida at that time. I was there, 2007. I was there, and I saw things start. I started seeing things hit the fan real fast. I saw a lot of lock boxes on doors, a lot of huge posters on doors from the fire marshal, basically repossessing properties. I've never seen it before until I was there. You know what I'm saying?
Now, the key difference between the U.S. market and mortgages and the Canadian market, though, is the personal guarantee. Mm-hmm. That plays a huge role because the fact is that if you default on a mortgage, the big banks here can haunt you for years after you make a default. Whereas a lot of these were ninja loans with limited covenants, which meant that down in the States they had the ability to walk away the second that their equity disappeared. So there was very little incentive to stay once they had negative equity in the house.
So this was a question that arose on the show many times, people asking if people could walk away from their mortgages in Canada. And Canada, I know you can't do it. What do they usually do when people default on mortgages? What's the process that happens?
Well, the standard process is a foreclosure process. So the lender, one of the big banks usually, will take you to court, and usually takes 3 to 6 months to get to court to do so. Mm-hmm. But will take you to court and get a status that's known as order nisi. That gives them the right to sell it. And at that point in time, they have the ability to put it on the market, and it's sold as best as possible. Typically, the realtor who sells it is required to expose it to the market for a minimum of a certain number of days to show that they made reasonable commercial efforts to sell it, and then it sells for whatever it's worth. But the problem is that it's always on an as-is basis, which means that a buyer takes a risk buying it because if there's something wrong with the strata or there's something wrong with the house, they're stuck with it. They have no recourse to go after to sell it. So as a result, in the event of a foreclosure purchase, you're almost always going to see a discount. And then, even then, when you go into the court as a buyer, which I've done for several clients in the past, in fact, I just lost one a few weeks ago, there can be a bidding war in the courtroom on the day of decision. So you don't even know if you have this after doing all the due diligence and all the work. You don't even know if you own this unit until the court is over, until the court case is settled and done.
Wow.
So what happens is that you generally price at a discount because you're taking a risk. So as a result, the market naturally and organically goes down. Now, when you have no covenant and therefore no desire to hold on to this house, then that allows for these houses to get liquidated on a mass basis at a huge discount. But when people are personally liable for their mortgages and it haunts them for years, it can actually be mitigated from their wages for years in the future.
Oh, yes.
Personal bankruptcy, things like that.
So people's wages get garnished in Canada?
They can be.
They can be. Okay. So
It's
many
up to the judge.
many people have asked me, can I walk away? Because in the U.S. where you are right now, and people just walk away, because I know a lot of Wells Fargo customers were dropping their keys off at the branch and saying, "Here's my keys. I'm not paying for a house worth less than what I bought it for." Right?
Exactly. So the problem is you'll never see that level of momentum in Canada versus down in the States. Like, I mean, I love the fact that New York has such a free market enterprise type approach. It's very unique. I love the fact that the U.S. as a whole, generally speaking, is less regulated. But in this particular regard, I think Canada may have it right in the sense that it ensures that the market doesn't see massive mass psychology fluctuations.
Yes. And like you said, New York is a very free, open market, right?
Very much so.
Are there a lot of foreign investors, or do you seeing more? Is it more American proper, or like what are you seeing there more?
Well, you see foreign investment absolutely, and have forever in New York. I mean, that's a given. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a shifting of the population demographic like you see in some other cities. But I mean, New York's always been a very multicultural city.
Yeah, it's got everyone there.
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on the cities right now that are experiencing huge downfalls, and let's start off with, where do you see Vancouver in the next year?
It depends what product type you're talking about. So what was interesting about when Vancouver implemented that tax, the foreign buyer tax, there was a huge ramp up in commercial purchases. So small bay industrial, large bay industrial, office towers, things like that sold like crazy all of a sudden because they just simply transitioned their investment from residential, which was protected, to commercial. At the same time, it's a tale of two markets, really. You've got the high-end market, which is exposed substantially. Then you have the low-end market, and that's anything below, at least based on their incomes, anything below about $750,000, $650,000. And that market is fairly secure. That one has enough demand, enough pent-up demand, that if the market even dropped 10, 15%, every one of the echo boom generation, of the Zennials and the millennials will jump on it.
Okay, because the housing market there is very stagnant. Where do you see the detached housing market in Vancouver going in the next year?
I think it will be flat for the foreseeable future. I mean, I wouldn't say that it's going to crash by any means. I don't think it's going to take off. But with the spike in interest rates that just came from the federal government, you should see some flattening of the growth rate. Okay.
Next city that's looking at some flatness is Toronto. Toronto dropped, 30 points in the last month.
Yeah.
So where do you see Toronto in the next year?
I think it's due for a comeback in a single-family home market in particular. It's an overreaction as a result of the new tax. It's the same thing that happened in Vancouver.
Exactly. What do you see in the detached market, housing market in Toronto, especially in the Greater Toronto area, like Oakville, Mississauga, Markham, Durham regions?
Well, particularly with the demographics. So you always got to look at the demographics in this case, and you think, okay, so basically you've got houses that are as a whole going to be growing in demand in the next 15 years because you've got the zennials, the echo boom, for lack of a better word, the echo boom coming to a child rearing age. They're going to need families, they're going to need houses, they're going to need space. They can't live in a bachelor anymore.
Exactly.
So as a result, the secondary markets around the periphery of the city demographically should grow quite rapidly in the next couple of years.
Okay. Now, London has been flat for 3 months now. No movement in London's markets, no dips in the market, but no growth in the last 3 months. Where do you see London? What do you see happening in London in the next year?
I think it's really going to be up to the government in this case. I think it comes down to, one, whether or not they make a successful Brexit smooth, or whether they renege on the Brexit. And the second thing is whether or not their planners are going to become more proactive, even if it means throwing in one or two high-rises in the core of London in places that they haven't before. That makes a material difference. Right now, with the height restrictions and even the number of runways they have on their airport right now, they got a major problem where they're short on runways. It's a matter of planning.
Are we talking about Heathrow?
Yes.
Okay.
They've been trying to bring in extra runways for a while, and they just can't get the space.
Okay. London's been flat for 3 months, so... Okay, let's go over to Auckland. Auckland hasn't seen, and I have the article in front of me, Auckland's housing market's slowest since July 2010. Auckland's been flat. No one's showing up anymore to bidding wars. No one's showing up for bidding anymore. No one's showing up and overpaying for homes. Where do you see New Zealand in the Southern Hemisphere? Where do you see it in the next year?
I mean, I've been to Auckland. It's a beautiful city. The geography is very dynamic. It's very hilly. Mm-hmm. But to be honest with you, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert in this market. I don't have enough information.
Okay. Well, I've been following Auckland very close, fine-tooth comb, and market's been flat. The government has been lying to the people, basically on several radio shows in the last couple of weeks, saying, oh, there's no housing crisis in Auckland, when you got meth homes. Have you heard of meth homes?
No. Can you explain that a little bit?
Meth homes are homes where there's people right now watching the show in New Zealand. They'll be watching the show tomorrow, actually, and they'll be like, yes, he said it again. Meth homes. Meth homes are, you have to get a meth test done on homes in New Zealand to make sure it's not contaminated.
Yes, that's standard in a number of municipalities.
It is so bad right now in New Zealand in the Southern Hemisphere. There's, especially with the abnormal cold winter they're having that they haven't had in many years, and lots of homelessness, lots of students tenting or camping outside. People renting out hammocks in their backyards for $1,000 a month in New Zealand. People renting out, a bunk bed, a bunk, for $1,000 US a month in New Zealand. And now the market's so flat, no one's showing up to the auctions, and it's been a big worry for a lot of investors. And New Zealand has the most per capita empty homes in the country, per capita.
Well, I mean, I know the economy isn't particularly large. I know that it's a relatively quiet country. You go there in the weekdays, and most major towns aren't exactly packed. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. So, I mean, Auckland's the exception because it's obviously a big city. Wellington, decent size as well. But I mean, most of the rest of the island isn't that dense.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of supporting economies. I mean, don't get me wrong; they've got their own primary economy, but it's not of scale to validate those sorts of expenses.
Yeah, and I see where you're coming. New Zealand depends a lot on Australia for support when it comes to one of their bigger trade partners. Okay, so where do you see Melbourne and Sydney? It's been out of control there. There's no measures being put in place. Everyone's bought out of the markets. I got a lot of people watching this show down under. What do you? I know maybe your expertise really isn't in that area, but what are you feeling? Like, what do you think?
Well, I mean, they tried a few years ago to slow down the foreign investment in single-family homes, in particular in Australia.
That was like 4 years ago, right?
Yeah, it had some effect, some positive effect in the short term. But the bottom line is that you look at Sydney, you look at Melbourne, and Melbourne is a place that's close to my heart. I've spent over several years there. It's a genuinely beautiful city. It's somewhere that people want to live, and they're willing to pay for it. And so it's a matter of supply and demand, and it's a matter of being able to defend that. And right now, you have a lot of people who want to live there. So how are you going to support it? You're either going to have to build a lot of new product to facilitate enough softening of demand to enough suffice of demand to offer adequate enough low end product. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble.
Exactly. So that's most of the markets. Seattle. Have you read up on Seattle lately? It's booming there. It's on fire.
Yes.
Yeah. What's going on with Seattle? Where do you see Seattle in the next year?
I think Seattle's trending up. If you look at the infrastructure that's going into Amazon, as well as a lot of the other major employers in that city, you can expect that market to be hot for a while.
Yeah, and for all places in the United States, Tacoma's trending 5th in the market. I can't believe it. Of all, it's like saying Dearborn, Michigan is 5th. You know what I mean? It's like
absolutely.
It's like saying if you're from New York, it's like saying Albany is trending 5th in the country. Like, how? You know what I'm saying? Anyways, guys, wrapping up the hour here. I want to thank Mr. X here from Manhattan. I think I slipped up and said his name a few times, but that's okay. I mean, I don't know how many people are going to do their homework and find out who it is. Mr. X is a really good trends analysis, understanding markets from all over the place, kind of putting things into proper perspective. And I really want to thank him for having me on the show. And if you're listening to this on replay, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And I'm going to leave you guys with this article here. Look it up. It's a really good article. It's really long. It's called Britain's Corrupt Housing Market Needs More Than a Lick of Paint. This was sent to me by someone that works at the London Guardian. Sent me this article and asked for me to read it on the show tonight. I cannot read it on the show because it's 12 pages long, but I will ask people to basically look this up and read it because it's a very well-written article, and it goes into depth of what's happening in the Britain's housing Ponzi scheme economy. Anyways, Mr. X, thanks for joining us. What time is it? It's like 1 o'clock there, right?
It's getting late.
Yeah, it's getting late. I'm going to let you get some sleep. I want to thank you very much for joining me on the show, and hopefully you could come on another time, and we could discuss maybe later on in the future what's been happening in the markets. And that's it, guys. Thanks for joining me, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button and get this out there. And all you radio listeners and syndicates, thank you very much for rebroadcasting my show. And thank you.